Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how to use FME to connect to Asana's API. So in this particular instance I'm using Asana, and Asana it's really a tool to enable teams to collaborate and track projects and tasks in a kind of intuitive way. So you might not be using Asana, but really what I'm going to be talking about here and the transformers I'm going to be using in FME, they're applicable to any web service. It's kind of like a workflow, and it's really all about working with APIs. So if we go into my Asana account, you can see here I have this project set up, and I can create tasks. So what we're going to do is use FME to first to connect to the API. I'll show you how to do that, and then we're going to automate creating a task in here. So build a workspace that it's going to do a few things. It's going to do some GET requests to look at data, and then it's going to do a POST request to the API to actually create objects. So it should walk through. It's probably going to take about 5 or 6 minutes to do this, relatively complicated. So what we're going to do is firstly open up FME Workbench. This is 2017.1. So the first thing we need to do before we start using transformers is we need to think about authentication. When we're in FME, if I'm going to add a creator down here which creates features for me, when we're working with APIs we're always using the HTTPCaller transformer. We'll go into more detail on this in a second, but what I want to show you here is that all of these APIs, they require authentication, and what we've added in FME in this release and really stabilize things is this web connection. And so I'm going to show you how to do this web connection thing now. So what we're essentially going to do is create an authentication object to Asana that we can reuse. So first thing you need to do is go find Asana's API. So the easiest way to do this, you can look through the doc, but I always just go to their API, Google it. So they have a nice API. Actually, it's one of the reasons why I'm using them. And you can see this is their getting started doc. So with FME, with any API, the first thing you need to do is click on authentication and try and figure out how you can authenticate with the API. So we support OAuth 2, and so that's what I'm going to walk through in this scenario. And OAuth 2 is quite complicated scenario. So what we're doing is trying to make things as easy as possible. So what you could do is you could create this OAuth 2 object yourself in Workbench. So if we go in here, what you can do is under Preferences, FME Tools and Options in Windows, under Web Connections, you could actually, under Managed Services, you could create a new OAuth 2 service, and you can fill all this out. You can go through the doc here, and fill all this out, look at the token, refresh code and the authorization code, but that's complicated and we don't really want you to do that. So I've actually uploaded a web connection to the FME Hub and the Asana web connection. And if you look on FME Hub now, this is increasing in popularity. You can see quite a few web connections have been added, both by me, by Save Software, and by community people. So this is going to expand. So how do we use this connection? Well, I can type in here and let's find Asana, and I can download this web connection. But we also have integrations directly within FME. So I'm going to close out of this. So in this FME Options Web Connections dialog, I can go to Managed Services, and I can actually download this. These ones here are all the ones that are on the FME Hub. So I'm going to double click on Asana, and I'm going to download it here. Okay, so I've imported Asana. So if you look, I've created this one and I've already filled out a whole bunch of information for you. I filled out all the authorization, the retrieve tokens, the refresh tokens, everything's been done. The complex part's been done. If we go to the thing, what you actually need to do here is you need to register for an Asana account. You need to visit your account settings dialog, and we need to add a new application. So let's do that. We're going to go here and we're going to add an application, and the application is called FME Workbench. So I have one here already. So let's deauthorize that. I'm going to go Manage Developer Apps. So what I'm going to do here, what are we doing here with this application? Why do we need to do this? Well, with OAuth 2, what FME Workbench does is it's going to kind of do a series of handshakes with Asana to basically say, is this person who's trying to access the API, are they valid? Have they provided the correct credentials? And Asana want to be able to track what everyone's doing. They want to be able to track, where all the traffic's coming from. So they need to create an app on their side. And what this is essentially doing, we're going to create an FME Workbench app here. And so when you interact with Asana via the API and Workbench, it's going to go through this app. So firstly, Asana know who's doing what with regards to API call and which developer's responsible for the API calls. But they can also do other things like throttling and rate limiting and things like that. But you also need to define a few things in here, because Asana needs to be able to, when a request comes to Asana, it needs to be able to make sure it redirects to the right place. So let's put in the details here, safe.com, and we want to redirect to localhost, because FME is a desktop app, and so we're basically doing some magic on our end, and so it looks like a local host to Asana. So I'm going to create this app now, and it's going to give me this. So, I could add an icon if I wanted here, a nice FME icon, and I can do a few more things. But crucially, what's happened here is it's created this client ID and client secret for me, and this is what I need. These are the two things here, and I'm going to add these to FME now, and it's these two things that are going to essentially allow Asana to understand which app is connecting to it. So I'm going to paste in the client secret here. Okay, and now we're going to apply that and save that. And because I've configured everything else for you before, all you should need to do now is test this. And so now I'm going to enter my username and password. So you can see this is actually this is the Asana web app embedded in FME. You're entering your username and password for the Asana account that you need to, invoke the API against. So I want to create tasks or add new users in this account. So I'm logging in with this account. So let's test this. Okay, and look what it's saying. So, FME Workbench is requesting permission to use Asana Connect to access your Asana account. Do you want to authorize this app and give it permissions? So me as Stuart Harper, yes, I do want to allow FME Workbench to basically authenticate and connect to Asana. I'm going to give FME Workbench this permission. And so now you saw there how Asana gave back an access token. And that's what we were looking for. So that workflow is now complete. So I'm going to click OK. And so what I can do now is go into this HTTPCaller, and I can go down here and I can go use authentication, and I can choose web connection. And here I can add a web connection. I just tested before, but it's the same workflow here. So this is going to create a new web connection. Click login. Okay, so now that token is now stored, and I can reuse this web connection throughout FME Workbench. So what we need to figure out now is what API calls we're going to do. So let's go back to, let's save that firstly. Okay, and let's go back to the developer documentation. And what we want to do now is look at the API reference. So often the API reference is separated out. And so the first thing we're just going to do is go to users. So I just want to get, go into Explorer here, but I just want to look at the documentation here. And we're just going to get this simple call here, users/me. So that's the call, but what's the full URL? Well, it probably shows you somewhere, but this is essentially the URL here. So API version 1, that's the kind of root URL. So I'm going to copy that, paste that in here, and then if you look here, it's users/me gets a single user, it gets the information about you. So let's add that in there, and then this is a GET request because it's saying here GET, so you're just requesting an object from the server. That's all I should need to do. I'm telling it which endpoint to hit, I'm telling it what to do when it hits the endpoint to get the data, and I'm providing authentication. So let's add some loggers on here, and let's run this workspace. Okay, so that's been successful. So let's see what that brought back. Okay, so it pulled back my information, my ID, my email, my name, my photo if I had one, and also the workspaces that I've created. And they're kind of like the projects that I've created. So next thing we need to do though is we need to get at the data. So you can see this data response body. I need to get this ID out. I need to get this user ID out. So I'm going to add in a JSON flattener. This is a transformer. It's quite popular and very popular when working with APIs. So let's open this up, and I'm going to add the response body is the JSON document I want to work with. You can see here, this is where the JSON is, and I want to get at this ID. So all I need to actually do is I can come in here and I can type in data.id, and you can see here it's data because it's looking inside the JSON, so it's going, here's the data attribute, and then I want to access the ID attribute, so data.id. And note I've also put recursively flatten objects, so basically FME is going to cascade through the JSON objects and flatten it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add an attribute manager actually, because there's going to be a lot of information coming through here. And I'm actually going to rename this because this is the user ID, and I'm going to need this later when I start posting information. So, and what I'm going to do with these ones is, because I don't need them anymore, is I'm just going to remove those. So that looks good. So now what I should be able to do is move my logger over here, run this, and out the logger we should see user ID has a value. So now I've got that data out, and you can see it's put the user ID into this value. So that's great. But things a little bit more complicated now. What I want to do now is I want to create a task in here. So this is called a workspace in Asana. My tasks in Traction TM project. This is really a workspace, this container. So I'm going to get all of the workspaces within Asana, and I'm just going to get the first one. I know this is the first one, and I'm going to get the ID of that, and then I'm going to use that ID to create a task in here. So how do we do that? We go back to the documentation, and this time we want to go to workspaces. And you can see here are the workspaces calls. So this is what Workspaces has as an ID, name, and is organization. So get available workspaces. So that's going to actually return one workspace, but this one get/workspaces is going to return all of the workspaces. So I'm going to go back to FME, and I'm going to add an HTTPCaller. And this time I'm going to do actually I'm going to copy the root URL from here. Like that. I could make that into a constant, that might be a good idea. And then I'm going to do workspaces. And I'm going to do get. And note I can reuse my authentication from here that I used in the other one. I've already created that. FME is already storing the token. So now let's attach a logger here and then run that again. So let's see what happened there. Well, what happened is we got all of the workspaces. So you can see here this is a response body, and I didn't pass anything in there. So how did it know which workspaces to get, which account? Well, remember I authenticated with stuart.harper@safe.com, so it's using that kind of namespace and saying get all of the workspaces within Stuart's account. So I'm going to use this traction one. Let's create something in there. So what I need to do to create a task, if we go back to the API here, task, and I'm going to create a task. You'll note that I actually do need to pass in some information. So I need to pass in the assignee, which is the user. So which user do I want to assign this task to? Well, let's do it to me. So I'm going to get my user ID. And then also which workspace do I want to assign the task to? So what we need to do here now to create a task is a post. So that's slightly different. So let's go back to FME Workbench. And what we're going to do in here is we're going to do get workspaces. So let's see what that returns. So actually, sorry, I've already returned that. So what I need to do now is I need to get at this ID because this is my workspace ID. So I need that ID. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to use the JSON extractor transformer. So let's add in JSON extractor transformer and attach that to there. And so this one, what this is doing is it allows you to essentially write, we call it JSON queries against the incoming JSON. So the response body again is going to contain that workspace JSON. And the target attribute, this is the attribute we want to extract. So I'm going to extract the ID, and let's extract the name of the project as well, just so I can show you. So you can see in the help here, you need to construct this JSON query now. So under help, if you go in JSON's query, it kind of shows you how to do that, and then there's a lot more information on JSON queries here on how to use them. This is what people often struggle with when working with APIs, and it does take a little bit of getting used to. So I'm going to do JSON, which calls essentially the JSON query, and then the first thing I need to do is get this JSON object. So to do that, you do this, which extracts the data object. And then I need to get at the ID object. But note, this is an array, so there's multiple objects within this array. So I just want to get this first object here. So I'm going to do like this, and this means get the first object in the array. And then I want to get the ID. So that's actually going to be, what's that going to be? It's going to be the workspace ID, isn't it? Okay. And so now what we need to do is also, let's get the name as well, so I can copy that, and the name attribute is there, it is just name, so that's great. So I have the workspace ID in the name, click OK, let's run the workspace. Okay, so that worked, and let's see, oh sorry I didn't attach a logger, but let's have a quick look. Actually, let's just run that again. I'll attach the logger and then it's clearer for you. Because we should have two, we should have those two attributes that are clearly visible now, because we do need those. So we could see if we move up, probably at the top, name has, where is it? Oh, here we go, sorry. Name is Traction TM Projects, and user ID has value this, which is from the first caller. And then the workspace ID has this value. Perfect. So we have user ID, workspace ID. So what we need to do now is create a task. So let's go back to this. So we're going to post some information now. And this is all, these are all of the data I could post. I couldn't do quite a lot on a task when it's due. Custom fields. We're going to keep things simple though. What I'm going to do is add an HTTPCaller again. Trusty friend, so versatile and so crucial when working with APIs. Let's move this down here so you can see. And what's the URL? Well, we go back, it's that root URL. It's the same, and then /tasks. And we're doing a post this time, so a get is essentially it's just getting information. A put is an update, and a post creates. And then what I want to do is pass in query string parameters. So how do I know to do that? Well, I know that this curl request here, data URL encode, is actually query string parameters, but you know, this is where it can get a little bit confusing. You know, do I pass things in the upload body, or do I use multi-part form data? And you know, this is where things can get a bit tricky. So if you are interacting with an API, firstly try and see, you know, if there's any documentation here higher up that shows you how to work with the API. It sometimes kind of tells you how to do things outside of the scope of the individual API calls. But we're going to go in tasks again, And what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a signee, so we're going to assign it to me, and we're going to pass in also the workspace ID on create only. Look, and this is a workspace associated with. So let's do that. So we've got the assignee, and that's going to be mapped to the user ID. We're going to add some notes. So what do you want to please do the washing up, and we're going to do the we're going to add a name for the actual my first task, and then we're going to add in which workspace we want to associate it with. Workspace ID, and note this is actually, I don't want this to be, this is actually the name, it's looking at the attribute, so I want to, I'm going to have to do that because I don't want to use the attribute, I want it to be called name. Okay, so that looks good, user ID, or what else do we need to do? Of course, we need to set the authentication, and it's going to be, you got it, web connection and Asana, and I think the rest we can just leave. Okay, so what we should see now, let's add a logger here. Really, I mean, we can watch the logger, sure, but what we're really looking for, note there's no tasks in here now. We should run this and we should see a task appear in here, and there's my first new task, my first task. And if we click on that, please do the washing up, created 11:44 AM, which is, it is, and it's assigned to me. So you can see here, I mean, it's not the most beautiful workspace, but you can see that logic where you need to chain things together often with APIs, because often you need to, especially in doing creates and updates, you need to get object IDs. So you're going to need to do a get on a higher object, extract that ID, and then reuse it further down the chain. It's extremely powerful though, and as I say, this model doesn't just relate to Asana. Essentially, it's exactly the same pattern for any API. If you have any questions, or you want to add your own but you can't figure it out, that's great. Please contact us on live chat or via support@safe.com, and we'd be more than happy to help you there. Thank you for your time.